The email arrived early in the morning, buried between advertisements and spam, carrying a subject line that sounded harmless enough to ignore. Aesthetic compliance notice. The kind of phrase HOAs loved to use because it felt polite, official, and unquestionable. I opened it casually, not knowing it was about to ignite a chain reaction that would turn my quiet neighborhood into a national embarrassment for the board. The message informed me that my American flag violated community standards. The placement was allegedly incorrect. The size was described as visually disruptive. The mounting hardware was listed as unapproved. The solution was simple, according to them: remove the flag within 72 hours or face fines that would increase daily. No explanation. No discussion. Just a deadline. The flag had been hanging there for years. It wasn't oversized, torn, faded, or damaged. It hung neatly from a bracket by my front porch, properly lit, well-maintained, and no different from countless flags across the country. It had survived holidays, storms, and changing HOA boards without issue. Until now, I went straight to the bylaws, expecting to find a specific rule I had somehow missed. What I found instead was vague language about maintaining uniform aesthetics and decorative items needing approval. Nothing specifically banned flags. Nothing justified immediate enforcement. Nothing explained why this suddenly mattered after. Years of silence. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a misunderstanding and started feeling like control. The next notice arrived faster than expected. This one was firmer, colder, and far more threatening. It referenced prior warnings that never happened and included a projected fine schedule that escalated aggressively. Late fees were already listed, even though no fines had technically been issued yet. The paper trail was being created without my participation. I walked outside and looked around the neighborhood. Seasonal banners, sports flags, decorative signs, yard ornaments. None of them appeared to be a problem. Only my flag was singled out. I chose not to remove it, not out of rebellion, but out of principle. If the HOA wanted compliance, they needed to point to an actual rule. Threats and vague language weren't enough. The flag stayed exactly where it was. That decision changed everything. Neighbors started noticing the official-looking notices taped discreetly near my door. Conversations began quietly, usually when no one else was around. Some admitted they had received similar warnings over minor issues and paid just to avoid trouble. Others said they had always wondered how far the HOA would push if someone refused. The third notice arrived by certified mail. This one outlined potential legal action. It framed the issue as settled, describing my refusal as ongoing defiance. Administrative fees were added. Enforcement costs appeared on the ledger before any enforcement occurred. The total balance climbed rapidly, as if designed to overwhelm. Instead of backing down, I documented everything. Emails, letters, dates, screenshots, photos of the flag and surrounding properties, copies of the bylaws, patterns of selective enforcement. The more I gathered, the clearer it became. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about authority. Then someone shared the story online. A neighbor posted screenshots in a local community group, initially asking whether an HOA could legally ban an American flag. The post exploded. Comments poured in. People shared outrage, similar experiences, and disbelief. The story spread beyond the neighborhood faster than the HOA could control. Within days, local media outlets reached out, and the HOA went silent. No explanations. No clarification. Just more automated notices, sent as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The spotlight was on them now, standing on my porch that evening, watching the flag move gently in the breeze. I realized the HOA had made a critical mistake. They thought this would end quietly. They were wrong. Asterisk. Once the story reached the local news, the HOA's authority began to crack. Reporters requested comment. They asked for copies of the rule allegedly being violated. They wanted to know why enforcement began suddenly after years of approval. They questioned the fine structure and the lack of due process. The HOA responded with generic statements about maintaining community standards, carefully avoiding specifics. That avoidance only fueled the fire. The story spread to regional outlets. Photos of the flag hanging peacefully on my porch were shown alongside excerpts from HOA violation notices. The contrast was impossible to ignore. What was being framed as an aesthetic issue now looked like blatant overreach. Public pressure mounted quickly. Neighbors, who had once stayed quiet, began sharing their own experiences. Surprise fines, selective enforcement, threats of penalties over trivial issues. A pattern emerged, and it wasn't flattering. The HOA board attempted damage control behind closed doors. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Notices were sent reminding residents about decor rules. But the tone had shifted. These messages no longer felt authoritative. They felt defensive. Then the HOA made their second mistake. They escalated again. A formal fine was issued, followed by a notice of intent to pursue further action if the flag remained. Legal language appeared. Costs increased. The balance grew to a level that was clearly punitive rather than corrective. It was a show of force meant to scare me into compliance. Instead, it backfired. The escalation was documented, shared, analyzed. Legal experts weighed in publicly, questioning the HOA's interpretation of its own rules. Advocacy groups highlighted state and federal protections for flag displays. What had started as a neighborhood dispute was now a public relations nightmare. Cameras appeared on the street. The HOA's silence turned into frantic messaging. Statements were released that contradicted earlier notices. Board members declined interviews. Emails went unanswered. The more they tried to avoid accountability, the worse it looked. Behind the scenes, cracks widened. Emails leaked showing internal disagreement among board members. Some questioned why the issue had been pursued so aggressively. Others worried about legal exposure. The unity they projected outward was gone. Meanwhile, fines continued to accumulate on paper, but their legitimacy was now openly challenged. Lawyers began reaching out, offering support. Advocacy organizations took notice. The HOA's actions were no longer operating in a vacuum. The narrative, it flipped. What was once framed as a homeowner refusing to comply now looked like an HOA abusing power. The board that prided itself on order and control was being portrayed as reckless and out of touch, and still, the flag remained. Every day it stayed up was another reminder of the HOA's miscalculation. They could have resolved this quietly. They could have clarified the rules. They could have backed down early. Instead, they doubled down. And karma doesn't miss twice. The reversal came quickly once legal reality set in. The HOA issued a sudden notice suspending enforcement related to the flag. No apology. No admission. Just a quiet pause that spoke volumes. The fines stopped accruing. The threats vanished. The aggressive tone disappeared overnight. It wasn't enough. The damage had already been done, under mounting pressure. The board scheduled an open meeting. Attendance was higher than it had ever been. Residents demanded transparency. Questions poured in about selective enforcement, fine policies, and legal authority. The board struggled to respond, trapped between past actions and public scrutiny. Within weeks, changes followed. The violation against my property was formally dismissed. All related fines were wiped clean. The HOA quietly revised its guidelines, adding explicit language protecting flag displays. Board members resigned. Management contracts were reviewed. The structure that allowed unchecked enforcement began to unravel. Media coverage shifted from outrage to consequence. The HOA was no longer the enforcer. It was the cautionary tale. Neighbors who had once felt powerless now understood their rights. Conversations changed. Compliance was no longer blind. Authority was no longer assumed. The dynamic had permanently shifted. As for the flag, it never moved. It remained exactly where it had always been, not as a symbol of defiance, but as a reminder. A reminder that power without restraint invites exposure, that control without accountability collapses under scrutiny, and that sometimes the fastest way to lose authority is to overreach. The HOA thought this would be a simple enforcement action. Instead, it became their legacy, and karma arrived right on time.